It's easy to have an idea, but for an idea to sustain over a period of time, it has to be politically acceptable, socially desirable, technologically feasible, financially viable, administratively doable, and judicially tenable.
Hi, my name is Pranav Kothari. I work at Educational Initiatives, and we've worked a lot with state governments and national governments across the world. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to Anil Swarup. Given his long tenure of working inside the government, I'm curious to learn what is it that he really enjoyed, how did he deal with a variety of stakeholders who he calls the mafia when they were trying to work with multiple sectors that he operated in. He has been a big advocate for technology in education, and I want to understand where can it really help children learn, and what are some pitfalls of technology in education that we should be cognizant of. I also want to hear his book recommendations, given that he's read more than 750 books in the last 7 years. So glad to have you on the show, and I'm really looking forward to our call. You've created a movement of sorts with hashtag Nexus for Good. Can you tell us more about the genesis of that idea and what you hope to achieve from it?
You know, the idea came on what is going around in the society as a whole. You watch the news in the evening and you'll be very depressed because it's all negative. Everyone is talking about negative activities around you. So that's the narrative that is being built these days. The second was, I personally felt that all the good people are fighting their battles all alone. All the rascals and ruffians have got together and they're able to stick together. They're able to fight together. So in this context, I thought, how about attempting to change the narrative a bit? Try and create a narrative of goodness. And I chose the word nexus just to attract attention because nexus has a pejorative meaning. But I chose it consciously as nexus of good. And the attempt now is to see whether we can identify good practices, whether we can recognize good practices, whether we can talk about good practices, whether we can replicate good practices after understanding the how of it, and whether we can scale good practices. Thereby creating an environment where everyone takes pride in doing good things, they take pride in talking about good things, they take pride in talking about good people, so goodness can spread. So this is basically creating some sort of a positive energy around us, for us to do which we ought to do in any case, but we are unable to do because of the dominance of the nexus of evil, so to say.
So how are you spreading this nexus of good?
You know, social media has come very handy. So I'm trying to use social media. I've set up a Twitter handle of @Nexus of Good. I'm using also LinkedIn for the purpose, the Facebook. And we also plan to set up a portal separately, subsequently, to see how this could spread. I think it will evolve. I don't have a set plan as to how it will go, how we'll go about it. But I'm quite convinced, basically on the basis of the reaction that I'm getting, the positive reaction that I'm getting from people around, how people are coming to associate. I'm also moving around the country in different contexts because I go down to deliver talks on various issues. And many of them have asked me to speak on Nexus of Good. So there is this so-called demand for Nexus of Good as well, because inherently I believe that people are good. Right. Men are good. It is the question of creating that opportunity for them to roadshow goodness.
So I've seen that you have been a big fan of not reinventing the wheel. I remember when you joined as Secretary of Education, you visited more than 20 states within the first few months. You have seen what's happening on the ground. You've organized these road shows where you've gotten different education providers, an audience with the state government education stakeholders. If you can just share your thoughts, what was in your mind, why did you do all of this, that'd be great to hear.
Let me give you a bit of a background on this. When I took over or when I was posted as coal secretary, someone asked me, are you sure you'll join the coal sector? I said, I'll certainly join. What's wrong with it? Then he asked me, have you seen the gangs of Wasipur? So that was my introduction to coal sector, and I discovered, yes, it was pretty bad, but by God's grace, everything went off well. But thereafter, when I was posted as education secretary, very interestingly, I had no experience whatsoever in the education sector. So in the first month of my existence there were a lot of advisors who came in. I call them Rai Sahabs in UP. They give you advice and then they walk away. They don't know what to do with it, but they nonetheless give you advice. And there was a lot of international advice also coming in. You know, we are obsessed with England, Finland, Scotland, Holland, New Zealand, all the lands of the world without looking at what is going on in our motherland here. So I decided after a month to go around the country and look for myself as to what is happening within the country. And I was so pleasantly surprised to see what I saw. Amazing, outstanding work being done in the field. I traveled intensively. I went to places like Bastar, Sukma, drove from Pune to Goa, getting down on the way, looking at the schools, drove from Srinagar to Leh, not taking the national highway. So I saw a lot of world within India and amazing stuff being done. And I narrate a couple of examples to you to illustrate what I saw and what I thought could be done in India. The logic was very simple. It is not so easy to import an idea, do a proof of concept and scale it. An idea that is already working in the country, it's much easier to scale it because it's succeeded in those objective conditions. Take, for example, this school in a place called Pastepada. It's 120 kilometers north of Thane. As I walked into that school, and probably I was the first ever secretary to walk into a school like that, what I saw shocked me actually. There was no electricity in the school. And as I walked in, I found that every child had a tablet. There was a smart screen. There was a local Wi-Fi. There was no internet. So I asked this teacher, where do you get the bijli from? Electricity from? He said, "Aiye sir." He took me behind the school. He showed me a foldable solar panel, which he was using to charge his batteries, through which he charged the other things.
Amazing.
I was amazed. I said, how did you do all this? He said, sir, when I came here, I had a second-hand laptop. And we had about 30, 40 children in different classes and doing virtually nothing. So I used to get those educational videos in the laptop and show it to them, and they started finding it good. So they used to go home and tell their parents about it. So after a month or 2 months, those parents came over and said, Ki, the child is learning and they want to go to the school now. They want to look at some of the videos you're showing. So he explained to them and they were very happy, the parents. So the teacher had those entrepreneurial ideas. So he requested the parents to contribute for 2 tablets. So some of them contributed. He bought 2 tablets and then he attached them to the laptop and made them into 2 groups and continued with that. In the meanwhile, some NGOs and CSR funding agencies got interested. They visited the school and agreed to fund the tablets for the children.
Very nice.
That's how it stabilized, and at that point in time, I visited there. So what did I do? I took a photograph with the teacher and tweeted it. Suddenly he became a local hero. So more schools around the place started visiting for pilgrimage here and started replicating in their own small way. In the meanwhile, when I was in Delhi, I had the occasion to meet the President of India. So I mentioned this case to him. I told him that this Sandeep Gund is doing wonderful work. Would you like to meet him? So he agreed.
Wow.
So when he came over here for the Teachers Award, I made him meet the President and took a photograph, and that was tweeted again. And suddenly Sandeep Gund becomes a national hero. So look at the impact it has. This is a homegrown Indian model, not imported from Finland, England, Scotland. Maharashtra government took the initiative. Without contributing a single penny, they got it replicated in 60,000 schools of Maharashtra.
Wow.
300 odd crore rupees were contributed by the CSR funding agencies, not a penny from the government, but government played the role of a facilitator. I think the crowning came when I was visiting a school in Gujarat, where a teacher from another school came running to me. He was insisting that I should go to his school. So I asked him why. He said, sir, मैंने संदीप गुंड से ज़्यादा अच्छा काम किया. Here is a guy in Gujarat telling me that he's done better than. So that's the power of social media. That's the power of good work that has happened here in India. So while visiting these 24 states in the first 3 months, we managed to identify about 111 models, which were very good. Then we had this workshop in Delhi, where we called all these people to understand how they've done it. And out of these 110 odd models, we picked up about 20, 24 models. And then went back to the states, held these workshops that you were mentioning, and roadshowed these successful models to the states. States started picking up those models. Now, these models are basically based on public-private partnership. The problem in our country is that it is either or. It is public versus private. Everywhere it's, you're fighting with each other. My aim was that why should we fight with each other? There's so much good that is happening in private domain and so much good that is happening in public domain. There's no contradiction. Why can't they come together? I've always believed that quality will come from the private domain, scale from the public domain. And if they come together, things will scale fast. That is precisely what happened in these workshops, where we could roadshow. In fact, we got the NGOs also together. Many of the NGOs that met each other didn't know that the other NGO was doing that. They could learn from each other. Right. So there was learning from within the public domain, private domain. Right. There was learning between public and private domain. There's learning between public domain. Those states were learning from each other. So those workshops were, I think, a game changer in terms of bringing together the public and the private for them to promote that was good that was already happening, the good models that were happening. And the advantage was, it was not merely an idea that was being discussed. We were ideating out of something that had already happened. Correct. So there was evidence already for something having happened. So the chances of their getting replicated and scaled were much higher. A lot of them did scale.
So this, I think, unlocked a lot of value, right? Because the innovation or things that were happening on small scale finally got the global audience, or at least the national audience. They got replicated elsewhere. Things got multiplied. It had like a multiplier effect. So going forward, how should this be sustained? What recommendations do you have for NGOs, for governments, on how to continue the matchmaking spark that you started, and how to sort of sustain that?
So the idea was to institutionalize all this. So we set up a portal called Shala Sarthi portal. It's already there, where all NGOs have been requested to register themselves. They are then certified, so to say, by the government, so that the CSR funding agency and the state governments have the comfort of negotiating with these NGOs. The problem with the NGO domain is that quite a few of them, as like in any other domain of the society, are good, bad and ugly. So who tells them this NGO is safe enough for you to negotiate with them? Shala Sarthi enables that. So if I remember correctly, about 100 NGOs already registered. There are a large number of CSR funding agencies that are registered. So it's a platform where CSR funding agencies, the state government and the NGOs could interact, interface, negotiate, as also to see what is the status of the project that they are executing it. So all the projects being run by NGOs in the education domain have now been placed on the portal, and anybody can go and see what is happening to that project.
So this dichotomy, where education of a child in terms of his or her learning takes a lot of time, but this tremendous pressure on whether it be private organizations or government officials to show short-term impact. How will we ever resolve this?
No, it will not get resolved in the manner that we want to resolve it. There are people who are committed to doing the things right, irrespective of the immediate consequence thereof. They continue to do it. Gradually, I think the awareness is there. If you look at the developed countries, that's how they evolved. To begin with, probably the focus was not that. You look at the 18th century Russia, the Peter the Great, or thereafter Catherine, both of them understood over a period of time the importance of education. Now that understanding is there even now in countries like India. They understand the importance of education, but the need for them, politically and otherwise, is such that they can't give so much emphasis to education as is required to be given for it to be understood at each level. Now, this is something which the society has to resolve over a period of time. And as things are evolving, as I saw in my career of a year and 8 months as education secretary, there was this increasing awareness about bringing about a change in education. Maybe it may not be as great as maybe the emphasis that was given to Make in India or things which are more visible, but I could see this change coming in, people understanding the importance of education in certain aspects.
So, but all of us have short-term sustainability questions, right? Companies need to make ends meet. IS officials have 1 or 2 years of tenure as a principal secretary. With all of those pressures to finish things in short term, but education on outcomes takes a long time to. Is there any advice on how to stay in for the long haul, how to be patient? That is, keeping in mind the reality of short-term funding and positions.
The advice would be to see that this civil servant who's put there has a sufficiently long tenure to understand and then deliver a few things. That's very important. Second, for the politician again to understand that education can transform societies, which some of them do understand, but probably in the rush for things that have to be done immediately, they're unable to devote that much time and attention to it. That needs to be understood at that level. At the bureaucratic level, I think we should not be too bothered about the tenure that one has, because the beauty of bureaucracy is the continuity that comes with it. So if the initiatives that are taken by one civil servant are carried on by the other, then the continuity remains. So if you can leave behind institutions and institutional memory that can carry on what you're doing. So not merely in education, my approach has been that you should come to a situation where an individual becomes redundant and systems take over. Now it's easier said than done. You have to build those systems and you have to see how they sustain them. And this can happen by creating an interest around a system that you create, so that once you get out, that system continues. So I used to tell people that it's easy to have an idea, but for an idea to sustain over a period of time, it has to be politically acceptable, socially desirable, technologically feasible, financially viable, administratively doable, and judicially tenable. Until these 6 factors are fulfilled, an idea will not sustain, it will work for a while, then either the politician will not accept it, or there would be no money for it, or administratively it will be very difficult, or ultimately the judiciary will say it's judicially untenable. So if you can take care of these aspects, then the chances are that the idea will sustain.
So what role do you think technology can play in governance, in education? How can it be used effectively?
Technology to my mind can be a game changer. And when we talk of technology, it's not rocket technology actually. It's very simple technology which can actually bring about a transformation. I have experienced it in my entire career, and I plan to continue to do that as I go along. For example, when I was chosen to head the project monitoring group in the Cabinet Secretariat, anything that could go wrong had gone wrong in the system. They were all scams, coal scam, Commonwealth Games scam, telecom scam, all scams had happened. And the sanctions or the clearances had come to a grinding halt. It was at that point in time that I was asked to head it. Now, given the fact that any decision that you took would be questioned, how do you go about doing things? Things have to be done. Yes. The bottom line is to make things move on the ground. So how do you do it? That's where technology came handy. So what did we do? We set up a portal wherein any industry having an investment of more than 1,000 crores could go to the portal, register themselves, indicate the problems that they had, and that problem will automatically flow to a designated joint secretary in a ministry who was mandated to give his comments on the portal. And thereafter, I used to hold these tripartite meetings sitting with the concerned ministry, the entrepreneur and myself, and used to take a decision. And the decision was recorded directly onto the portal. Now, why this transparency and why doing this? The reason was that we are all capable of making mistakes. We do make mistakes. Now, if I have nothing to hide, technology comes handy because I'll make it totally transparent. Whatever I have decided is already there on the portal.
Right.
There were a number of occasions where a few things were wrong. People pointed out immediately and we corrected it. And we admitted that we had committed a mistake. So was the case in coal block auctions. We did a large number of coal block auctions and no one pointed a finger because everything was transparent. We used technology to the hilt. The auctions were actually publicized on the web. You could actually see the live auctions happening. The decisions were placed on the portal. So we used technology to such an extent that we made the whole process transparent, thereby keeping ourselves safe. In the project monitoring group, in the 15 months that I was there, we facilitated clearance of projects worth 6 lakh crores.
Wow.
Now, this was amazing, and I was myself very surprised. People asked me, how and why did it happen? In an environment where there was suspicion all around. It happened because no matter how inefficient I am, to the public, I'd like to appear to be efficient. So when the world knows and I know that this guy is sitting on this file for so many hours and so many minutes, I'd like to clear that file.
Yes.
Right now, you don't really know who's sitting on which file or which paper or for how much time. Once that gets to be known to the world, he will expedite it. Very rarely you'll find people sitting on the file because almost everyone wants to appear to be efficient, even if it's inefficient. So technology, both in terms of bringing about transparency, protecting you from future questions, as well as in terms of expediting decision making, has an amazing role to play. And finally, I think technology can relieve the government of a lot of burden. It can relieve the common man of a lot of drudgery. Technology is absolutely amazing.
So you've presented a very positive side of transparency and of technology, right? Is there a downside towards this radical transparency that you've just described?
See, technology to my mind is like nuclear energy. You can use it, you can abuse it, you can misuse it. But you can't do away with it. It's there.
Right.
So if it's there, might as well join it to make the best out of it. Now the choice is mine. The question is, if I didn't have a choice, it would have been a problem. I have a choice to make positive use of this technology. Now it depends upon me. There is no such thing as objective technology or objective reality. It exists. It's material available to you. It's a question of how you use that material. That's the trick.
And so where in education have you sort of seen uses of technology that have benefited?
You know, like in any other segment, technology has been, will be, and continue to be a game changer. So for example, we've been talking about relieving the child of the burden of the bag that he carries, the books. Technology can be a game changer. So we had already started using QR codes in books where we could eliminate some material and use the QR code. But that probably will spread as technology spreads. At this point in time, web connectivity is not there in most of the places. But I'm very hopeful that over a period of time that will come through. So over a period of time, it will relieve the child of the burden that he has. Mind you, it will not replace the teacher, it will not replace the books. But it will facilitate and help the teacher as well as reduce the size of the books in terms of delivering education. Second, technology obviously can be used for video content, for audio content, for transmission purposes, for value adding to whatever is being taught, for making learning very interesting phenomena. Now you see the videos. I remember having seen a video on Archimedes' principle very recently. It took me a lot of time when I was a child to understand Archimedes' principle. Looking at that video, within a minute or two, I understood what Archimedes' principle was. So that's the power of technology. You can simplify things. Unfortunately, some of us make things more complicated with technology. There's nothing wrong with technology, its problem is with us. Technology is available. If we want to simplify things, we can simplify things. We should be doing that. Then, teacher is the pivot around whom the education revolves. Technology can play a phenomenal role in that. I remember we launched a portal called Diksha. You know, one of the problems with the teachers is that in some of the states of the country, the teachers don't go to the school. A World Bank study revealed that 25% of the teachers in these states do not go to the schools.
Wow.
Now imagine the impact it has on the education. Now look at how technology can change this. So we started with the experiment in Chhattisgarh, wherein we gave one tablet which was GPS linked to every school, and the teachers were asked to give this biometric impression. Attendance improved dramatically. So was the case in Andhra Pradesh. So technology can be used for that purpose. Then for further, that tablet itself could be used for upgrading the skills of the teacher by giving them material on the tablet which they could use. Similarly, it could help the student. So there are a number of ways in which technology can be used in education itself. I can go on and on. But in every segment, technology can be a game changer. It is already changing it, but it can be used phenomenally.
So life in the 21st century is changing so rapidly, right? And so would be within the education sector. What are some things that are timeless from the past that we should continue in the schools of the future? And what are some things that are relevant in the past but irrelevant in the future?
See, I think ethical values, the value system, will never change. Fundamentally, your good behavior, your honesty, these will never change, always be relevant. And they should be a part of the curriculum through and through. What has really to change, to my mind, is the manner in which education is being delivered. There again, technology can play a very important role. So their transformation is happening. You don't have to, like we started with a blackboard, now we are talking of whiteboard. And probably then we'll talk of no board. So the technology will change the manner in which education gets delivered, make it more attractive, more relevant, more updated. That, of course, will have to continue to change. But fundamental ethical values, something which is getting lost in this maze of technology and the changes that you're talking about, has to be brought back, not as a separate chapter, but as a part of the curriculum as you do. That discipline, that those values have to be a part of the system.
So in the government, there is a lot of scale to be achieved, right? Each state has somewhere between 30 to 50,000 schools. There are a lot of innovations that are being done by civil society organizations, private sector, that are starting in these. Before a government decides to scale up this across the entire state, what should be the evidence-based, the method of evaluation before an approval is given for a large scale up?
I must confess that as of now, there are no established or institutional mechanisms through which such evaluations do happen. But I think over a period of time that would be and should be done. Because before you scale a particular project, you must understand the implications or the outcomes of the effort that has gone into it. But when you talk in terms of, say, bringing in technology, as was done in Pastepada, I don't think you have to really do a scientific analysis of bringing electricity to a school, or for that matter, bringing that sort of technology to a school. That's an a priori requirement irrespective of what the ultimate impact is. I don't think anyone can deny the value add that will come through that. But in many other ways where if you are trying to looking at transforming education system, such sort of evaluation is imperative.
So let me challenge you a little bit on that. The same story was told 20 years ago that we should have classrooms and fans and benches and a school within 1 kilometer. And after doing that successfully, that we now have schools within 1 kilometer of every child for 99% of the population, learning outcomes haven't succeeded. Do you think this blind application of just putting technology without thinking through what is it that that technology would do, what is that content, would that really aid in learning outcomes improving, be making the same mistake? Because then we're just doing an infrastructure rollout without thinking through on how learning outcomes would improve.
We must understand this, that without infrastructure, you can't have anything else. So there are certain fundamental requirements. For that, I don't think you need to evaluate. You have to have a school building. You don't have to really evaluate the impact of a school building on learning outcomes per se, because if you don't add other things beyond the school building, learning outcomes will not improve. Let's take the converse example. You don't have school building. What sort of education are you going to impart there, and what sort of evaluation you'll do? So whereas we do need to have certain fundamental infrastructure, irrespective of the impact, beyond it, yes, it needs to be evaluated. So I don't think we'll have to do an impact evaluation for a school building to see whether we should have school buildings or not. That's an a priori requirement. It has to be there. But beyond it, what gets delivered in the school, that is something that needs to be evaluated.
It's been the tryst of trying to scale up anything. The mindshare ends up just going and executing that scale up. Let's take about technology and the deployment of tablets. They equal, and I'm not saying either or, I'm just saying together, where we've also thought through what we will use these tablets for, how are they actually helping in learning outcomes, also needs to be thought through.
Absolutely. So there has to be a baseline, which has happened actually, in terms of improvement of attendance, in terms of the learning outcomes of the child, the baseline. And then you do a midline and an endline survey as to whether the introduction of tablets has actually improved the learning outcomes. So that will have to be done, and to my understanding, that is being done. Probably it has to be done more intensively, more scientifically. That is something which needs to improve. That's not the culture that we live in. We like something, we try and replicate and scale it without understanding the implication of what we are trying to do it. That needs to be done. But be that as it may, the recognition of a good activity has to be there for you to understand the why of it, to understand the outcomes of it, and then try and replicate it. So I don't think there is any contradiction between them. Probably the direction that we have taken has to be more scientific, and as you rightly said, we have to keep evaluating as we go along while we replicate or scale any practice.
So there are a lot of NGO leaders out there and new NGOs that are coming about that would love to work with the government. What problems should they be solving that would help the government, scale up what they're doing?
So as I said, the government has this inability to reach out to the people as people, not as constituents. NGOs do that. They have a seamless arrangement or of interaction or interface with the common man, which the government by definition would find it difficult. That's something which needs to be leveraged. So for example, in case of out of school children, if government were to launch a public campaign, as you often say, it would lead to nothing absolutely, because for government to reach out, a government official to reach out to common man is difficult. But if the NGO does it, like for example this Humana People to People, what fabulous work they are doing. They're able to reach out to people, they are to understand their problems, and they're able to bring in here. Now they play that role. The government enables them through an infrastructure facility for them to do what they have to do. So that's the complementary role that NGO and the government can play. So NGOs can play a phenomenal role in reach out, in testing few projects, in doing things which the government is not capable in terms of providing quality. So there was another school that I visited in Lajpat Nagar. This is done by another NGO. I think People is the NGO which is doing it. They took over a municipal school and they've transformed that school. I visited that school. So there are a number of NGOs that are doing wonderful work, but the problem is that most of these NGOs are in a very limited domain. Now what the government has to do is to, because NGOs would have evaluated that, look at that evaluation report and see how do we scale it. So proof of concept exists through an NGO, now you see how you can scale. Now it can happen in three ways. I have been advising NGOs that there are three ways that you can do it. One, you scale up your operations yourself. You raise funds and scale the operation, and government plays a role of a facilitator. Then the second model could be that you partner with the government. Some of the activities get done by the NGOs, the other get done by the government. For example, teachers training is very important. So they get the faculty, the NGO gets the faculty to train the teacher. The T&D of the teacher gets borne by the government. So it's a partnership.
Right.
Then the third model could be the NGO plays role of only of an advisor to the government with the experience, and they could do it. So there are various ways in which NGOs can possibly engage with the government, should engage with the government, because it's beneficial to both. It's the job of the NGOs to do what they're doing, it's the job of the government to see quality education gets delivered, and if it has been already demonstrated by an NGO that quality education has been delivered in a particular manner, they can understand how it has happened and replicate and scale it here.
So we talked about NGOs and the government, but we didn't talk about private companies. How does the government view them? Is there viewed negatively to be set up as a private company versus an NGO?
You're talking of education?
Education companies.
See, in education, we've worked on a different psychology altogether. I was trying to grapple with it. Why? You know, somehow we have come to believe that private sector should not be there in education, but private sector is there. So we have tried to rein them in. So in reining them, we created a regime where it is stifling for the private sector, so it's not helping education. So the private sector mafia has come up with its own ways to bypass the regulations and try and continue to do what they're doing. As against that, if you open up the sector, and I started this debate, that why can't we open up education sector? What's wrong in having education in a commercial manner? We are not forcing a child to go to that school. We are not forcing a parent to pay that much. We have an alternative mechanism of government where if he can't pay that much, he can come to government school, we improve the quality here. What is the harm in allowing the private sector to grow in the education sector? I have still not understood why we still have that socialist bent of mind where we are unable to come out of this whole psychology of enabling the private sector to do what it is. See, as I said, there is a lot of suspicion between public and private. In the NGO domain, I tried to do that and substantially succeeded in dispelling these misapprehensions that we have, mutual misapprehensions, government and private. But as far as the private sector per se is concerned, probably I didn't have time enough to build that. That needs to be built. We should allow private sector to flourish and then have a regime that regime that is put in place by the private sector is not exploitative. To give an example, all this talk about putting a cap on fee has been going on for donkey's years, but we managed to find a solution. Sitting with FICCI eyes, we came up with a draft legislation which was then sent to UP government, which has enacted that legislation to the satisfaction of everyone. Look at some other states which tried to suppress the private sector through such legislations, and it's come to a disaster. Whereas in UP it has worked. Why has it worked? The fundamental logic was, When a child gets into a school, we should not put too much restriction on the fee structure that the school has. Let it work it out, because we are not forcing a child. Once the child goes to the school, then he should not be exploited. There has to be some rational relationship with the increase that they are trying to do, with the actual expenditure that happens. Everyone agreed. See, the problem with the education sector is the mafia that has come to dominate it. And when I say mafia, like definition, mafias are small in number. They are not the majority of these segments. They are in number of segments of education. Now, what has happened is that they want to sustain their control, and their control can be sustained so long as the mess continues. If the mess gets cleared, they can't control.
Right.
So, for example, this legislation that UP government has bought, now the mafias are really rattled, because then they could exclusively have that club benefiting out of the mess. It is like the restriction regime before 90s. Some of the private sector entities did not want to open up the country. The whole Bombay Club became infamous for that. Why? Because they were benefiting out of this restricted regime. So same goes for mafia. There are select set of schools which are benefiting out of the mess that is there, so they don't want to clear the mess.
So there are a lot of young IS officers joining the services. What advice do you have for them as it relates to looking when they would at an education portfolio?
You might find it apparently not very sexy, but it's one of the finest engagements that you'll have. Education is so fundamental to a society, and the sense of satisfaction that you can derive out of bringing about that change is absolutely amazing. I wish I had more time as Secretary of Education. I wish I could spend more time in education, because that actually deals with the fundamentals of human existence, and you can do a lot.
So how many books have you read in the last 7 years?
In 7 years, I would have read, what about 740, 750 books.
750 books in 7 years. That's about 100 books a year.
Yeah.
That's about 10 books a month almost.
Yes.
So any top recommendations? What are your top 5 books that you would recommend us?
If I were to pick the top 5 books, I've both from fiction and non-fiction. I'll start with some of the books that have impacted my personality. And there are 3 books that I would list out. One is by Robin Sharma, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. The second is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And the third is Secrets by Rhonda Byrne. Similar philosophy in all 3, but they impacted me enormously. From the fiction, probably the best on the top of the shack was by Khalid Hosseini, The Kite Runner.
Yes.
It is an amazing book that impacted me. Then I read a few other fictions. One, I remember the Glass Palace by Dev Kurni. I'm forgetting a full name. The other one was by Kavita Kane. This is about Karna's wife. Is another mythology-based book, fantastic book. Then on the front of economics, though I didn't agree with most of what was written, the one by Milton Friedman was absolute. I don't espouse to his philosophy, but I like that book. And then, of course, The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman.
Yes.
But what I found even better than World is Flat was Nexus and the Olive Tree, which was written before this. It's absolutely amazing books. So I've loved these books. I've enjoyed these books, and I can't forget this book by Amartya Sen, The Argumentative Indian, and the other one, The Identity and Violence. Some absolutely amazing books. So I've read from all sorts, from pure pulp to economics to theology. Theology, I think Karen Armstrong on Islam is an absolutely amazing book. So they are wonderful books that I've come across. I've enjoyed reading them.
It shows in the width and the breadth of knowledge that you have.
The more I read, the more I discovered how ignorant I was. So it induced me to read even more. So I love reading now. I love traveling. It gives me time to read, because while waiting at the airport, while on the flight, what do? Either watch a movie or just daydream. I've often wondered what people do doing nothing.
Great. Thank you so much, sir. It was wonderful chatting with you.
Thank you.
I loved it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.